Oh, technical. Okay, so welcome everyone. As you know, this is our AGM for the Royal Berkshire Foundation Trust. It's also being videoed and will be posted live on our website. So everything that's going to occur here today is being filmed and audio is being taken. So by definition, if you're either online or if you're here in the room, I'm taking that as a consent to allow us to do that filming and to record the audio of the meeting. So thank you for that. Look, welcome. It's really lovely to finally see some faces, but we have gone through somewhat exceptional times, and as you might imagine, both as governors and as members of the public, we have been under constant pressure now for some 18 months, and it would be wrong if I didn't, right up front, recognise the fact that the only reason we've got through the last 18 months is because of the exceptional performances of all of our teams across all of the locations that we manage. And I think if you are a citizen of the area that we look after, if you're a resident, if you are a patient that's been in our hospital or in one of our facilities, I hope you feel incredibly proud that the team of people here at the Royal Berkshire has done what they've done, because I think they've kept us in a much better place than many, and I think they've done an exceptional job. So up front, I think we should all recognise that, and certainly I feel very proud of them. The other thing I wanted to say right up front, often we recognise the members of staff and the teams around the hospital that do all sorts of jobs, but very rarely do we recognise the leadership. And this 18 months we've gone through has been perhaps one of the toughest times I've ever seen in my business life. And a lot of what happens right at the front line is driven from decisions made at the very top of the organisation. And so it's only right that I recognise the leadership that has led this business over the last 18 months, that has made the tough decisions and has constantly focused on the care of our patients, looking after our teams and our staff wherever they may be, even when they're not in the trust, and put in the dedication, the time that was way beyond what I could have asked from them. So I think, again, I just want to recognise the executive leadership team particularly, who have done so much with such dedication to get us through this. We're not at the end of it yet, but they have done such a great job, and I personally thank you from the depths of my heart. So here we are, AGM, as I say. It is the first step into a new world. So we have, for those that are online at the moment, we do have webinars running, we have audio facilities running. As I say, it will be recorded for the website, but we also have, for the first time in a long time, some wonderful faces in the room, people I recognise, but some of which I haven't seen for 18 months and many I've never met before, but in person. But it's great to finally stand in front of a live audience. We are operating with the restrictions that are still in place, so we have social distancing. I encourage you, if you are here physically, if you wander out and come back in, there is sanitisers on the door. You will note that we will do our very best to put masks on when we're moving about. I'd ask you to do the same. But it is great to be back in front of a live audience again and actually looking at some real faces. So welcome. For those online, we do have a few dozen people online, so welcome. I know that some of our governors couldn't make it today, so welcome to them. And we have a large number of the public online, so great to see, great to see. A couple of admin things. We are physically in a room again. The normal, it seems like boring stuff, but critical stuff. If there is no fire alarm planned, if there is, out of the door, go out the way you came in. The muster point is in front of the car park, so if you make your way over there. I've already mentioned the videoing. Just to repeat, we are videoing. The audio is being recorded and will be posted. So if that is, I take your consent now that I've said that. If you're in the room and that's unacceptable, then of course feel free to step out. Last but not least, I would say if you've got phones, normal thing, turn them off or at least go silent. And in a moment we'll get into the presentations, but I did want to say right up front, there are already some questions we've received from members of the public. You have questions, I'm sure, in the room, and I'm sure people online have questions. I promise you there will be time for those questions to be posed at the end of the speeches. All of the executives know that there will be questions, and I will direct those questions to the appropriate executive to respond at that time. So hopefully we'll get through as many as possible. We'll just watch how the time goes, and if any that we can't get to, you have my personal commitment and promise that they will be responded to online after the event. But obviously, in the end, we'll be managed by the deadline that we have here in the room. So with that, if I can just show you who you're going to be seeing today. There's 4 people that will come up here and dance their piece for you. First of all, me. This is my 6th AGM. I always love these events. This finally being in front of a live audience is exciting. In a moment, I'll introduce Steve. You know Steve. He's been around since, forever, it seems like now. So Steve, our Chief Executive. Nikki, as you remember, was acting Chief Executive last year. So Nikki is now Chief Financial Officer again, and she'll be talking. And last but not least, someone else that's been around since whenever, Tony Lloyd, as your lead governor, recently reappointed as lead governor following the election we just had. So we'll introduce each one of those as we go along. But hope you enjoy it. As I say, great to be live. Steve, can I pass back to you, or pass to you now, and I'll let you pick up from there.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. So Steve Mcmanus, Chief Exec. Thanks, Graham. Been around for forever, certainly since the beginning of 2017. So I'd echo Graham's comments about being great to be in front of a live audience, as well as having kind of colleagues and members of the public also beaming in virtually. One of the most exciting things was that Graham's actually had to tell us where the fire safety mustering point is, which is a new experience of being kind of back face to face again. I'd just really like to kind of start by kind of echoing Graham's kind of thanks to all of our staff and volunteers. We have 5,500 staff and volunteers across our organisation, and in all aspects of our lives, the last 18 months has been enormously challenging. Every one of us has carried a different challenge that the pandemic has provided us with, whether it's in our work environment or a home environment. But we've had a hugely dedicated group of staff and volunteers who have consistently delivered for this community. And I'm massively proud to be in this organisation. It feels a real privilege to do the role that I do and to be part of that. And we wanted to start by really showing you a video, a little bit about the experiences of the last year, and really demonstrating some of that in the context of our own people, rather than necessarily me speaking. So we're going to run a short video, and then I'll just elaborate on some of those points thereafter. It's been a year like no other. A year of unprecedented challenges, pressures and changes. But whilst COVID has been front, back and centre of all we've done, we mustn't lose sight of the many huge achievements we've been able to deliver over these last 12 months. This video gives just a snapshot of some of them. It shows how we've been pioneering, progressive, persistent and passionate in everything we've done in the face of this pandemic. And we've done this with our care values at the heart of everything we do. It showcases how we brought our Vision 2025 promises to life, and it sends out a clear message that we're in a strong position now to tackle the challenges and the opportunities over the next 12 months. You could do a round of applause, but I think that's fine. Only if you feel you need to. So I really hope you kind of enjoyed that short film. I think it tries to bring to life that in what has been, a year dominated by COVID, with all the ramifications for our patients, staff and the organisation overall, there's been a huge amount achieved, both in terms of dealing with the effects of the pandemic over the last 18 months, but actually really beyond that in terms of what we've continued to try and do around our programme around Vision 2025. So there's been some amazing things done. We've experienced kind of real highs and lows across the kind of hospital and the wider community. We work out of 7 different hospital sites now, and you saw the Dingley Child Development Centre at the White Knights campus up at Reading University has been kind of open and is fully operating there now. By the end of March, the Royal Berkshire was one of the highest performing trusts nationally for vaccine uptake, with over 97% of our staff and volunteers receiving the first dose of the vaccine. Our work on Vision 2025 has enabled us really to react rapidly to changing circumstances, to continue to focus on non-COVID patients and deliver accelerated recovery to the position we are now as of today. And we've learned a huge amount from COVID that we'll absolutely take into the next kind of phase. We've continued to deliver the highest quality of care throughout the pandemic, thanks to the work of our amazing teams, and I'll say a little bit more about that shortly. And I'm, really proud that this has been recognised by the Care Quality Commission, the CQC, and particularly our infection prevention and control work that runs through the kind of DNA of the organisation, and in many ways has been pioneering and has set some of the agenda kind of nationally as well. During the pressures of COVID, we've continued to maintain a really crucial focus on our non-COVID patients, and at every opportunity we've looked to consistently maintain a level of non-COVID activity that has been, risk assessed, looked at in terms of its kind of safety, so as we've been able to resume services as soon as we possibly could when it was safe to do so. And we've also responded to the changing nature of COVID through real innovation, through things like our long COVID clinic, that again you saw there, that was set up almost overnight. And that has actually also helped to inform the national agenda around how we're going to need to support patients with long COVID for the coming weeks, months, and likely years as well. So just on our staff have just been immensely resilient, and again, I can't say enough how much I'm in awe of the work that they've done during the pandemic, and that's across all of our staff groups, all of our sites, but also our kind of volunteers who, throughout the pandemic, with new volunteers as well as our established volunteers, have sought to really support the organisation, and the wider community rallying around the work of the hospital on all of our sites. It's important that we note here also the incredibly sad passing of 2 of our colleagues, so Dr. Peter Tunn and Julie Edwards, which left a huge void for us all. And we've created a memorial to their memory as part of the gardens that we've got now in the new Wellbeing Centre. And I just really would like to note and recognise, their passing and their memory. There's been a huge focus on staff health and wellbeing services. We've appointed a dedicated staff health and wellbeing officer. We're currently providing around 60 wellbeing services, including psychological support, a free app around wellbeing initiatives and support, and counselling sessions as well for staff and staff teams. We're also progressing the work, as you saw again on the video, of the kind of really ambitious project that's again been supported by donations from the community around providing a permanent staff wellbeing centre on the Royal Berkshire Hospital site with a whole range of facilities that will be available for staff once that opens. We've got a wide range of staff networks which are really crucial to the lifeblood of the organisation. Particularly want to flag the work being done by our BME network. Members of the senior leadership team attend that kind of network, And this close working relationship has been recognised by the Health Service Journal, which showed that we had one of the lowest incidences of discrimination towards colleagues from an ethnic minority background compared to other hospitals across England. And as a trust, one of the things that we've always said and been hugely proud of is that we're a global community. We've got colleagues from 40 different countries who are part of our workforce and of our volunteers group, and that really kind of supports the culture of the Royal Berkshire, and it's a real source of pride for us. Just looking at some of the developments in integrated care. So our response to COVID has absolutely been in partnership with the community, building on some really strong relationships that we have here within Berkshire West, but across that kind of wider geography that we serve as well. So the programme TIC-19, which is triage into community for COVID-19 patients, was a real innovation, working with hospital staff, our primary care staff, really around looking at providing COVID support into the community, closer to our patient home, and reducing some of the pressure on the hospital and improving outcomes for patients. We've extended our presence across our various sites, speeding up outpatient transformation and increasing the use of our digital capabilities to develop different ways that patients can interact with clinical teams across the hospital. The Berkshire and Oxfordshire and West Berkshire integrated care system has continued to develop and grow over the past year, supporting things like critical care capacity across that geography, supporting mutual aid across clinical services, and supporting the movement of things like protective equipment where that was needed to get it into the right place kind of quickly. And again, showing the value of working at that sort of scale. And we're taking a lead role as an organisation very much in the ongoing development of the integrated care system through our leadership and through the development of new roles across that geography. Also want to just focus on some of the work that we've continued around transformation and innovation. So our focus on research, innovation and technology ahead of the pandemic stood us in a really great position as we went into the last kind of 18 months. We were able to innovate, as highlighted in the video earlier, to develop new treatments and new ways of working and bringing that to bear for our community in spite of some of the challenges over the last 12 to 18 months. We've really deepened our partnership with the University of Reading, including increasing our work on advanced analytics and also wider partnerships around how we use our estate across both the campus for the university and our own campus on the site at the Royal Berkshire Hospital. And we've recently signed off a further period of partnership with the university. And I would just like to take this opportunity to really publicly thank our colleagues at the University of Reading for their support during the last 12 to 18 months, which, along with other organisations and institutions across Reading and Berkshire, was hugely supportive and hugely helpful for us. I'm also proud that we're one of the very few hospitals that maintained its digital journey during this last period, with the delivery of some major changes to the kind of digital capability in areas like maternity and also across our surgical pathways in theatres and anaesthetics as well, increasingly moving towards a paperless or paper-light hospital with all the benefits that that can provide us. And our investment in innovation through the work around outpatient transformation programs mean that we are in a really strong kind of position to rapidly increase the volume of activity that we're able to do in a virtual way through outpatient clinics, as I've previously kind of mentioned, but also to offer those different channels of the way that patients and the public can interact with their clinical services at the hospital. Just looking at long-term financial sustainability, and I won't steal any of Nikki's thunder, who will come to some of that shortly. And Nikki will cover the detail of our financial performance in her presentation shortly. But I really want to highlight some of the significant progress that we've been able to make in taking steps towards our potential new hospital, and work that we've been able to do in expanding and reconfiguring our emergency department to cope with some of the ongoing pressures and challenges that we have across urgent and emergency care. But that work, that enabling work that you can see on the slide there, is really about some of that kind of preparation work that we've been doing to really try and make the most of the physical estate that we have both at the Royal Berkshire Hospital site, but to really make the most of all of our hospital sites that we have, with more services being run out of West Berkshire Community Hospital, our physical facilities at Bracknell, at Townlands Hospital, and opening up new facilities as we have done on the White Knights campus with the University of Reading. In addition, we've provided a national service through using our Bracknell health space, the top floor, where we've been able to develop the Lighthouse Laboratory for the southeast of England. And this has really enabled the refitting of that facility to then be used for some of the work through, at that point, NHS Test and Trace around the testing for COVID. And that lab is now operating 24/7 and has recruited over 400 staff into 14 different types of logistics and laboratory roles, and has created a new major employer in that area around kind of Bracknell. So it's one of the really important roles that we provide at the Royal Berkshire is that opportunity to develop opportunities in terms of local employment within the communities around us as well. So just finally, before I hand over to Nikki, it is a huge thank you. It's been a team and community effort like never before, something that we would never want to experience again. But the work that the team across the Royal Berkshire kind of hospitals and our community has been absolutely incredible. I wanted to say a really kind of public thank you, to our staff, but also specifically to the public and the community around Reading and West Berkshire for the huge amount of support that they've given us through what has been a tumultuous period. And whilst everyone played a part, there's just a couple of specific thanks I'd like to make. So I'd like to thank Nikki particularly for stepping up in between first wave and second wave and acting up as Chief Executive during that period whilst I was on secondment to NHS Test and Trace, and for kind of her leadership during that period of time. So thank you, Nikki. And someone who's not with us today, but again was really key and instrumental through that kind of period, our previous Chief Nurse, Caroline Ainsley, who retired from the organisation in May of this year. And that also gives us the opportunity to welcome Eamon Sullivan, who's our new Chief Nurse, who started with us at the end of May. So with that, I'll hand over to Nikki to take you into the next section. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And I'm going to start with some thanks as well. I'd like to thank all of our staff for their support during that 8-month period. My exec colleagues, you know what you did, and I wouldn't have done it with anyone else, so thank you. And all our NEDs and our chairman for their support during that time as well. So the exciting part of our AGM, if you're an accountant like me, the financial bit. So without further ado, our group accounts, as you know, we're a group. We have a charity and we also have a trading subsidiary. So we're effectively 3 entities that consolidate together. Our group accounts follow international financial reporting standards, and if you're an accountant like me, you'll know those back to front, but effectively it means that we can't do whatever we like with our numbers. They have to be prepared in a particular way using particular methodologies to allow consistency and comparison recording between different organisations. We are audited by Deloitte, so one of the big 4 accounting firms, check out all our balances, check we've handled things appropriately and give an opinion. We got a clean audit opinion, no adjustments were required. And we submitted our financial statements to NHS England Improvement, our regulator, during June, and they were laid before Parliament, which sounds very grand, doesn't it, Caroline? But effectively, that's something we have to do as a public sector organisation to make sure we have transparency about the funds that we're trusted to administer. The auditors, say, issued an unqualified audit opinion, and PwC, who provide our internal audit services, again, they were happy with all of the work they'd done reviewing our internal controls and endorsed that opinion. We pay a lot of attention to the income and expenditure statement within the NHS. We also do to the balance sheet as well, but starting with income. So again, if you're running a company locally or if you're looking at your own position, what we got in versus what we spent out, happy days if income is greater than expenditure. And we reported a surplus this year, a larger surplus than last year. We had a different funding regime. As soon as it became apparent that we were in a pandemic, the government reviewed how NHS organisations were reimbursed and moved everybody onto a block contract arrangement. So if we had other things to worry about, like infection control and a virus, we certainly were assured that our cash flows were going to be sound. And that block contract arrangement, although in a slightly different form, continues to this day. You'll see a huge increase in our operating costs. That reflects the level of expenditure we needed to incur to run our services. You've heard about the extra PPE we used. We also have to space our bays, so beds are further apart, and we have to spend a lot more time and money cleaning, and we needed additional staff for our additional ICU capacity, which at one stage went up from 15 beds to 41 beds. So operating cost increases. We've continued to pay our public dividend capital. This is effectively a 3.5% charge on our net assets. So that's consistent with prior years. In terms of cash flow, those of you who regularly attend our board meetings will know cash is king, and our cash flow has been really positive this year. We generated cash flow from operations of just over 32 million. We spent 48 of it on fixed assets, and Steve's described some of the capital programme, and I've got some more detail on that shortly. But we also received significant additional capital, so you'll see 46.2 million of extra PDC, extra public dividend capital coming into our trust to carry out some of the investments which I'll describe shortly. That resulted in a net increase in our group balance sheet. We went up from net assets of 251 million last year to 300 million this year. So really positive from a liquidity and a net assets point of view. If you look at that compared to our budget, again, you'll know each year we set a plan, our budget. Little did we know what the year ahead was going to be, but again, we've got better than budget performance this year. We had, as I say, certainty over our income, even though we weren't doing as much elective activity as we've done in prior years. We were still able to fulfil our budget obligations. And you can see on there the scale of the difference. Our pay bill was 38 million more than the plan, due to the factors I've just described. So in terms of looking ahead to the year we're currently in, because we've just had a look back at the year ended 31st of March, we're planning for a break-even budget this year. We are in a break-even position year to date, and we've been planning and delivering that all year. We've just received new planning guidance, which will steer us through the second half of the year, and we're just assimilating what that actually means in terms of the details. So we'll be updating our budgets again shortly. We are planning to start achieving some efficiency levels again, and the tariff has been adjusted to reflect that. And then other costs you'll see in there, we have capital charges. So every time we build new assets or create new fixed assets, we have a depreciation charge. So there's a higher bill associated with those. Capital spend. Steve showed some of the pictures of the work in progress, showing the diggers and the nibblers that were removing bits of West Drive during the year. Over the last 2 years, we've in essence delivered a programme of over 100 million, which is no mean feat, particularly against a backdrop of suppliers having to furlough staff. Many of our suppliers actually shut up shop for several months. They removed themselves from the market, so we had to seek alternative suppliers to deliver our capital programme. Clearly, EU exit has had an impact. Things like our changing room for the housekeeping staff, which you'll see on the back of the maternity block, that was stranded in Europe, and we had to pull quite a lot of levers to get that onshore. And also a number of COVID infections amongst our contractors. So following additional regulations about working in cramped spaces, we had to work teams in relays, particularly on the de-steaming project, because they weren't allowed to be in close contact. And certainly on the Lighthouse project, we had 3 shifts a day, working 8-hour shifts each, to make sure that we could keep that scheme going to time and on budget. The early drawdown funding has been essential for helping us make progress on our site redevelopment. We were fortunate to be successful in our bids and were awarded £12.7 million. The large blue boxes that you see on the diagram are the temporary boilers that we had parked in front of pathology for several months. These kept hot water and heating flowing throughout the period while we replaced the beautiful new shiny boilers that you see in the diagram on the right. That project, I can't underestimate how much complexity was involved in that. We had to remove 3 kilometres of pipework from under the ground and at no time allow hot water to stop and make sure that the buildings retained an ambient temperature throughout. We often look at buildings and things you can see. Just as important, and I would argue even more important actually, is the things that you can't see. They're what keeps the site running 24/7. So just starting top left, those of you who know me well will know I'm a woman obsessed with chillers. These beautiful objects have meant that we've kept the temperatures in all our main buildings really helpful for our staff. Nobody's got overheated wearing all of the PPE that we now require, because we've got brand new chillers on Battle Block, South Block, Centre Block and Maternity Block. Initially we had to plumb them in temporarily because we couldn't get the parts to do so permanently, but they're now permanently installed and regulate the temperatures for all of our staff and patients. It also meant that even though we weren't allowed to use the temporary facilities we'd got in terms of air conditioning units that are mobile, they were banned during COVID because they spread infection. We were able to retain those internal temperatures. Bottom left, asbestos again, nobody sees this, it's there. It's fine as long as you don't disturb it, but unfortunately when we need to rewire or put in Wi-Fi, we end up having to get near it. So we've done a huge amount of asbestos removal and we'll continue with that programme in the months and years ahead. Centre top, again, if you're a little bit of an anorak like me, the G59 generator controls. It looks a bit like a James Bond movie, but believe me, they're far more important. These are the panels that allow us to flick between generators and mains. So we do our monthly generator test, we do our annual black test where we switch everything off from mains to generators to check we've got resilience. And these panels are now completely refreshed, so anywhere in the trust can effortlessly switch between the two. Bottom middle, catering kettles and washware. Again, if you've had the pleasure of dining in our restaurant, you'll know how wonderful our food is. We had to refresh these facilities, so new kettles to cook all of the food and washware to enable us to provide better facilities. Again, hygienic cleaning of plates and cutlery, also improve the conditions, working conditions for our staff, and make sure that even though we'd removed the steam which used to power those kettles, we could still make sure we generated sufficient hot water. Top right, roofs. Again, you saw on Steve's film the acres of roofs that we have in the trust. We've done a massive amount of roof repairs this year, still more to do, but again, essential to keep our staff and patients dry and protect the equipment that's below and the patients so that nobody gets water in the wrong place. And the bottom right, I say the most complex project of all, the de-steaming of the site. We're now saving over £200,000 a year on water from avoidance of leaks from the old system, and we're starting to really count the benefits of reduced energy usage, which delivers our anchor institution commitment to low carbon and moving towards a zero carbon impact. While all this was going on, and we've heard about the amazing stuff that was happening with patient areas and with our staff in the clinical front line, I would like to go on record to thank those who, again, you won't have seen, but the people who kept the show on the road. Throughout this period, we continued to make sure we placed our orders with suppliers. We receipted thousands of deliveries every week and made sure those goods were distributed to the front lines where they were needed. We made sure we paid all our thousands of invoices, and it's over 100,000 invoices we receive each year. We made sure our billing was up to date, so we kept the cash flow coming in. Every member of staff got paid regularly on time with no problem. And again, I know it may sound, well, of course we did that, but our payroll teams came in tirelessly to make sure that happened, and that was never a concern. We continued to forecast in very uncertain times. I can't tell you how many versions of our forecast we had, but it ran to double digits to make sure that we were on top of and anticipating what was coming at us, both from a supply chain point of view, organising mutual aid for PPE, and also making sure we'd got orders in with our large capital works. And we would continue to file all our returns with the centre so they knew what was happening at our organisation as well. And at no point did we breach our standing financial instructions, which is our delegations from board. And I'd also like to thank colleagues who acted up around me, particularly Mike Clements, and the support I had from him when I was in the acting CEO position for 8 months, because these teams made it happen. So without further ado, and there will be questions later, and should anyone wish to, I have got the whole set of accounts here. I'm going to hand over to Tony Lloyd, our lead governor.
Speaking as a chartered accountant, I did find that riveting. Thank you. I'm an elected public governor for Wokingham Borough and the elected lead governor of this trust. And it's my duty at this AGM to report to members about the activity of governors during the year under review and to report changes in the makeup of council. The question that I'm asked most often by members of the public is, what are governors and what do you do? And I'll address that first of all. NHS Foundation Trusts were controversially set up in 2003 in the Health and Social Care Act to devolve decision-making from central government to local organisations and communities, thereby enabling them to be responsive to the needs and wishes of local people. The first Foundation Trust was set up in 2005 and the RBH came online in 2006. A Foundation Trust is publicly owned and is accountable to the local population, patients, carers and staff through a Council of Governors. The Council of Governors are appointed from stakeholder organisations such as local authorities or elected by members of the Trust. Anyone over the age of 16 in the Trust area can sign up to be a member of the Trust. Governors do not sit on the boards of Foundation Trusts. The Council of Governors appoints the Trust Chair and other non-executive directors, or NEDs as we tend to call them, to act on their behalf. Next slide, please. The 2012 Health and Social Care Act set out the statutory duties of governors more clearly. The two main duties of governors are holding the non-executive directors to account for the performance of the board and representing the interests of members and the public. No definitions of these clauses have ever been published, and this leads to wide variations in their implementation across the country. In this trust, governors have the opportunity to attend a number of meetings in order to hold NEDs to account for the performance of the board, including observing them at public board and by seeking assurance directly from them at governors' assurance committees. Regarding representing the views of members and the public, we use the Governors' Assurance Committee and council meetings as opportunities to feed back views from our constituents to the NEDs. At our membership committee, we discuss how to engage with members as well as planning for membership events in collaboration with the Trust Secretary. I would encourage all governors to attend meetings. Governors have additional statutory responsibilities. We are responsible for the appointment and reappointment of NEDs, including the chair. In May 2020, for example, we extended our chair's term of office for another 3 years, and we've agreed extensions to other NEDs during the year. For our most recent NED appointment, we used an executive search organisation that we'd not used before. From their outline proposals, we shortlisted candidates for interview. Prior to formal interview, each candidate got to lead a focus group consisting of governors, NEDs and executives. The formal interview panel includes the chair, but has a majority of governors and takes into account feedback from the focus groups before making a final recommendation to council for an appointment. Our most recent round of interviews led to an offer to Priya Hunt, who is with us this evening. Priya, can I welcome you to the Trust? On behalf of Council, we look forward to working with you. And thank you very much for applying to become a NED at this excellent Trust. Moving on, governors can initiate the removal of NEDs, but rarely do so. Even more rarely do we initiate the removal of the chair, though we can. And have done so on one occasion, long before I became a governor. Governors appoint the external auditors. Bearing in mind the scale of trust finances, this is an important safeguard. Although Council formally approves any new appointment, we rarely have any subsequent contact with the external auditors and rely on the NEDs on the Trust Audit Committee to keep us informed about their activities and performance. We are also required to approve any appointment of the Chief Executive, and some years ago did actually exercise the right to veto a proposed appointment. A new slide. As with many other organisations, the last 18 months have been very difficult. Until 2 weeks ago, the Council of Governors hadn't met physically since March 2020, and we've been obliged to resort to virtual meetings. The main meetings that have taken place are shown on this slide. The Council of Governors, the main decision-making forum, meets 4 times a year and is open to members of the public to ask questions and observe. As previously mentioned, the Governors' Assurance meetings are where governors meet with the NEDs to carry out our statutory duty of holding them to account for the performance of the board. These are closed meetings, and over the past 2 years we've been experimenting with different formats in order to try and maximise the effects of these meetings. The other formal meeting in public is the Membership Committee, which meets as required, but typically at least 4 times each year. We also have the Nominations and Remuneration Committee, which meets in private as required, but usually at least twice a year. Its main duties relate to the appointment and reappointment of non-executive directors, though we've also received assurance on NED remuneration during the year. The links to virtual public meetings are published on the Trust website, though special arrangements need to be made for members of the public that wish to ask questions. Governors are also expected to do their best to attend board meetings and the Trust AGM. New slide, please. Our governors come from a wide range of backgrounds and can be adept at holding the NEDs, and when they get the chance, executive directors to account. Over the last year, governors' questions have covered a wide range of subjects. This slide just shows a few of them, ranging from oxygen supplies at the very beginning of the pandemic through to the Trust response to the Ockenden report on maternity services. In particular, governors have been very concerned about staff health and wellbeing, and have also taken a great deal of interest in the hospital development plans as set out in the strategic outline case. New slide, please. Public and staff governors are elected for fixed terms of 3 years, unless they had applied for the residual term of a departing governor. Previously, the number of terms that a governor could serve was 2, which could, in the worst case, have restricted the total continuous years of service for some governors to just 4. Many governors have some initial difficulty in adapting to the role of being a governor, and it was felt that this was too restrictive and disruptive to the smooth operation of council. We've therefore recently increased the number of consecutive terms that a governor can serve from 2 to 3, which means that the maximum period of continuous service is now 9 years. This slide shows all the governors that were elected or appointed during the year under review and during the 5 months up to this AGM. Due to a proliferation of governors being elected for 1-year terms earlier in the year under review, a number of public and staff governors have had to endure 2 elections during this period. Nevertheless, as of today, all public and staff governors listed on this slide have contested one or more recent elections successfully and are therefore members of council as we head into 21-22. I would specifically like to mention the very recent election of Brian Painting and Roberta Stewart as public governors for Reading and Wokingham respectively, and Chris Plum as a staff governor representing admin and management. Their terms of office commence today, and I look forward to meeting and welcoming them. 3 appointed governors have also joined council: Wokingham councillor Parry Batt and more recently Reading councillor Deborah Edwards, together with Professor Carol Wagstaff representing the University of Reading. New slide, please. We've also seen governors departing during the year. Jonathan moved away from the area, Natalie left the Trust, Iffy and Kevin decided not to seek re-election, and both will be leaving after the AGM. There's been a significant turnover of appointed governors over the past year. I would, however, like to make special mention of the support provided by Professor Adrian Williams from the university. I would like to thank them all for their contributions to Council during their tenure, and furthermore, I would like to thank all past governors who may be attending or listening to this meeting for their considerable contributions in the past and for their continuing interest in the Trust. New slide, please. In total, we should have 29 governors, 15 of whom are public governors and 14 of whom are appointed or staff governors. At present, we have 26, which is the highest number for some time. Doing the sums, I'm an accountant, this leaves us with 3 vacancies which we would hope to fill in the near future. New slide. Our priorities for the year ahead are not dissimilar from those set out at the previous AGM. Regarding assurance, as previously stated, we have experimented with different ways of doing this and will continue to look for and press for increasingly effective options. Because of the pandemic, we have held neither membership events nor an open day this year, so we're very keen to restart them in new and innovative ways in order to increase participation from a wider range of members. We need to increase public membership and make it more representative of the community in which we live. Though we greatly value our current members, it is clear from an ethnicity analysis or from their age profiles that our 3,400 public members are not as representative of our community as we would like. If we can make our membership more representative, then we should aim to do the same for our Council of Governors. Though clearly a larger and more representative membership should help in that respect, and with encouragement might lead to members from underrepresented sectors of the community applying to become public governors. We intend to improve communication with members and the public. The resumption of membership events may help in this respect, but we will also be looking at developing a social media presence. Before closing, on behalf of the Council of Governors, I would like to acknowledge our Trust Secretary, Caroline Lynch, her Deputy, Hannah Travers, and the rest of their team. Their support is crucial to the work of governors, and we couldn't function without them. I'd like to thank them, and I'd like to thank you all for your attention. I'll now hand back to Graham.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Steve. For those of you that know me, I like to wander about at this stage and draw questions from the audience, but I'm under strict instructions to stand here. So this is what you've got of me this evening. But I will do my very best to field some questions. You'll also have noticed from the presentations that they were sharp and pithy. One of my drives and styles is to try and make the thing as efficient as possible. So I'd like to follow that through with the questions. Now, as I see it, we've got 25 minutes for questions. We've had a few that have been written in, and I intend to take those first, if I may. And then with the patience of the governors, who have lots of opportunities to question the executive, non-execs and me, I'll actually go to the online questions, if there are any, first. And they'll be voiced by the individual, and Hannah and Amber will help me there. But I thought I'd start with some written ones, and then I will point or look deeply at an executive to respond, if I may. So, I have 3 questions, which I'll start with. And please forgive me if you've written one of these. I will paraphrase them because often we have similar questions. So first of all, there's a question around the redevelopment of the hospital. So the questions that we received from 4 members of the public. The first one was seeking comment on whether we were going to relocate the hospital at a different location or whether we're going to rebuild. The second part was, if we relocate, where will it be? Will it be on the M4? Is it going to be on a bus route? Is it going to be built of modular buildings? And will there be a car park? No surprise on that question. And if it's a rebuild, what's going to happen on Redland Road? So that's a summation of the questions we've received, and I think it would be right if I look at Nikki to respond to that. So I think probably best if you come up here, and I'll step aside for you to respond.
Thank you, Graham, and thank you to whoever's asked those set of questions. If I may, I'm just going to, I guess, rattle through the elements of those. So just going back a little, back to December last year, we submitted our strategic outline case, which is the business case part of the process, on the 21st of December 2020. And we've been carrying out enabling works in the meantime. So you'll have seen the demolishing the buildings on West Drive and also the de-steaming project. We've also taken steps to occupy the Harborne building, which we're renting on the University of Reading White Knights site for our histopathology services, and those colleagues are moving in shortly. So that's part of the progress towards our site redevelopment. And you've also heard me talk earlier around the work we're doing to achieve net zero carbon and on our sustainability agenda. Those are all really important. One of the most important things, though, about our site redevelopment is the clinical services strategy refresh, and that's defining and looking forward to how we will want to run our services and the built environment we create around those for the future. So at this stage, we're not able to confirm whether we're going to stay on our current site or whether we're going to move to a different site. We considered 6 options at our strategic outline case stage, and we've put 3 of those forward as our preferred way forward. One of which was major brand new site, greenfield, brownfield site to be determined. We don't have a site as such. And the other 2 options were around the remain on our existing site and varying scales of redevelopment and scale on that. We continue to carry on with construction work. You'll know from the site itself, we've got all sorts of vintages of buildings. So whatever, under any scenario, we need to keep maintaining the site that we have and make improvements to some buildings. Some of that work is more urgent than others. And we're also looking at how we can pave the way for future construction or site development to take place should we remain on our site. We are dependent on national funding allocations for the rest of the site redevelopment over and above our annual capital plan. And we're working really closely with the new hospital programme team. In fact, I was really delighted we were able to welcome colleagues from that team to our site today. They met with me, Steve, Andy, colleagues from our estates team, and also our newly appointed programme director, Ali Foster. And we've spent pretty much all day with that team today. So we're really staying in close communications with the national team, and we're making sure we're learning and networking with good practice elsewhere.
Great, thank you, Nikki. The second question is a narrower question around a specific point which has come in, which is a question around why eye examinations are being undertaken at Landmark in Green Park by Health Harmony instead of at the eye clinic at the Royal Berks. Dom, do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah. Evening, everyone. My name's Dom Hardy. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at the Royal Berkshire NHSFT. It's a good question. Here at the Royal Berks, we work closely with a range of local providers to make sure patients can get access to appropriate high-quality care whenever they need it. The question's a little open, but it's possible that patients in the Berkshire West area could be offered an eye examination at Landmark by Health Harmony for a number of reasons. They could be referred direct from a community provider. They might be referred there as part of our elective recovery programme, or they could be referred there as part of a specialist screening programme. So a number of possible explanations for that.
Thank you, Dom. Right, the last written question I have is a question regarding security at the hospital, and particularly around the status with the security dispute with Kingdom and or the security staff, and what our current position is with regard to its resolution. I think, Suzanne, can I ask you to pick up on that one?
Thank you. I'm Susanna Mussendam and I'm the Deputy Chief People Officer. So yes, there is a dispute at the moment between our security staff who are supported through Unite the Union and Kingdom, who provide our security services. The Trust has actually been in contact with both parties and having regular dialogues. We have encouraged the parties to meet with ACAS to see if there's any way to resolve the conflict. But most importantly, we wanted to actually understand the dispute ourselves. Obviously, there is a fine line for us because the staff are employees of Kingdom, but they provide an incredibly valuable service to the Trust. But we don't have the ability to resolve the problem or resolve the dispute for the parties. So we have met with both parties. We are open to, or we have the dialogue open, and you'll appreciate I can't actually go into the detail of the dispute, but we are looking to continue to work with the parties to try and resolve this for the, whilst the contract is still in place.
Right, thank you, Suzanne. I think I'm going to go online now. So what I suggest is, if there's anyone online that would like to ask a question, can they? I think we're on Zoom, aren't we, Hannah? So if the people online can put their virtual hand up, then it will help Hannah and Amber identify. So what I suggest, so that we don't disenfranchise the people in the room, is let's take the first three questions online. I'm assuming there'll be three questions, and then I'll go into the room. So in the room, in a minute, I'll ask if you raise your hands if you have a question. Hannah. It will come over the speakers. Hello? Hello? Hello, yes, carry on.
I asked about security. I'm sorry, to come back at your end. I wondered why the contract was awarded to a small company who seemed to have little experience and seemed to be attempting to reduce the conditions of their staff. This wasn't considered in the answer. Has the Trust considered cancelling the contract, bringing the service in-house, or awarding it to another company that will take over the employment of the current staff on decent conditions?
Thank you for your question. Great question. I am going to counsel that we mustn't cross the commerciality discussion item, but Suzanne, do you want to pick that up again?
Thank you. I'd like to just advise that Kingdom is not actually a small company. It has over 7,000 employees across the country, and it has been in business for over 25 years. But in relation to are we looking to terminate the existing contract? Well, clearly there are penalties for us for actually doing that. What we are actually looking at is the duration of the contract and options that are available to us at the end of that contract. And that could be going back out to tender to appoint another provider, or it could be bringing in-house. But obviously we have to look at the options and the costing models associated with those.
Great, thanks, Suzanne. I will add to that. The board is very focused on this. It's been very visible at some of our board discussions. And many of us in our walks around the hospital have bumped into some of our colleagues who've been out the front on the picket line. So rest assured, we will not lose sight of the right solution here. Next question. No more questions online. Okay. So thank you. So back to the faces in the room then. So any questions for the executives? Yes. Do you want to, in the best healthy way you can, stand up and just say who you are so everyone recognises?
Tom Lake, so I'm Information Officer with South Reading Patient Voice, and also I'm actually an elected governor for Berkshire Healthcare as well, so the other firm.
They're our colleagues.
We see a lot of emphasis at the moment on health inequalities. COVID has pointed that out very sharply and unpleasantly, but we've all been aware of it, that there is a lot to do. And I wonder, from the point of view of an acute trust, you seem to be at the other end, sort of from perhaps the prevention end, at which it was obvious, but I wonder what an acute trust can really contribute in the way of easing health inequalities.
Who would like to have a go at that? Janet, can I invite you, or Steve? Janet? Yeah. Go for it, Janet.
I'm Janet Lippett, I'm the Chief Medical Officer. Great question, and really keen to share some of the work that we're doing in this area. We've got a number of projects going on, and in fact we met just, might have been this morning or yesterday, to try and collate everything that we are doing. I think the first thing to say is we do a lot in this arena. Whilst it may not have been labelled under health inequalities in the past, you're right that COVID has given us that focus. In particular, one of the projects I'm leading on, which is really quite innovative and novel, is a piece of work with our public health colleagues at Reading Borough Council. And in fact, next Friday, we're looking to try and jointly appoint a consultant in public health medicine, who it's very unusual for those to be appointed as part of an acute trust. And that's going to give us a really keen focus on a number of projects. In particular, we're working on 4 projects which we've identified this year. I'll try and remember them all. There's one around health and wellbeing of staff, which we've spoken quite a lot about tonight, and in particular incorporating health checks for over 40s, which I shall be taking part in. Then there's a couple of projects that touch, yes, there's a couple of projects that touch our maternity services around smoking cessation, and also looking at outcomes for BAME pregnancies, which nationally we know have a worse outcome. Actually, our levels are not out of step locally, but we do recognise that access in particular for those mothers can be difficult. And smoking cessation actually spreads across all of our patients, so we're looking to take that wider. And then the other one, perhaps more specifically looking at the recovery post-COVID, is looking at active management of waiting lists, so that you're not waiting on a waiting list, you're actually helping prepare yourself for surgery, and that will be looking at weight loss, smoking cessation, and improving the chronic health conditions as well. There's loads of other things. I could go on about this one all night, but I think that will give you a flavour of some of the work that we're doing on health inequalities.
Right, thank you, Janet. Any other questions online, Hannah? Victor, question in the room.
Victor Koroma, Alliance for Cohesion and Racial Equality. I was intrigued by a point that Steve made in his presentation, that the RBH is rated 4th as an acute hospital. And as any football fan will tell you, the league tables really do matter. And the closer you're at the top, or even at the top, the better. So my question is, who are the top 3? How far behind is RBH? And what were the lowest 2 gradings that has kept us 4th rather than 1st?
So what Victor's saying is we're not in the Champions League. and you know football better than me. Right, Steve, you have to respond to that. Pop up here.
Some of our staff survey data, maybe. So, Victor, great question, and so we'll kind of come back to you about some of those who's the top 3 and some of those specifics, because I don't have that at the tip of my fingers unless Suzanne has it, which I don't think she has. But I think it's a really good opportunity to, I suppose, underline a really deep-seated commitment to inclusion. And that's kind of inclusion, right across the board in the organisation. So it's really, really important to us that colleagues from, different backgrounds feel that they are, a part of the RBFT family, and that we really seek out all corners of the organisation to try and actually make that happen, whether that is colleagues from a BAME background, our LGBT plus community, colleagues with a disability, do feel kind of included in terms of their workplace. Colleagues where English is a second language are able to participate really meaningfully and develop within the organisation. So I think we have consistently invested in this as part of our culture, part of our care values, and how we behave to each other, over the last number of years. And I think we've seen that reflected in our annual staff survey. We're in the middle of the staff survey season at the moment, but we've seen that consistently coming through in terms of some of the improvements in our staff survey. We're really not complacent about that in terms of the continual effort that we need to put in. But maybe Suzanne will bring to life a couple of maybe stats or some information about the kind of staff survey side of things. But also it was really positive to see the feedback from our BME network, and it's not a forum now, it's a self-sustaining network that we've invested in within the organisation, where actually that kind of feedback from across our BME community put us in a positive position nationally around what people feel about being part of the organisation. So your challenge is absolutely right. How can we be number one in the organisation? And that's always got to be the ambition, to always try and look at being better than yesterday, and how can we support proper real inclusion in terms of how people feel about their role within the organisation. So we'll continue to strive to be number one and Champions League levels. But Suzanne, do you want to just kind of see if there's any kind of depth you want to provide on that in terms of staff survey info?
Thank you. I think I've just been reliably informed by my colleague that Northumbria are at the top of the table. So I think one of the key things that we do is we look at everything to see where we can make a little marginal gain. So yes, it's absolutely right that we need to be looking at the trusts that are scoring or are higher than us, but we actually want to look at those perhaps who might not be doing so well overall, but might have pockets of good practice. So I think that's really important. In relation to the staff survey, we were very pleased with our last results, and we are obviously, as Steve said, we're in the process of completing the staff survey again. What we've actually done since the last year is listen to the staff. We've fed back the results to them, and we've developed action plans and implementation plans, and we've now communicated back to staff to say, you said, we did, which I think is really important, so that loop is continuous. And I think as well as doing the staff survey, we've linked in our What Matters programme to make sure that we are listening to the staff voice. We've had some really insightful feedback in relation to that, and we are developing further actions as a result of that. I think that's probably okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne, and thanks, Victor. I've just got that final objective. I've got to put in Steve's objectives for the year. Hannah, nothing else online. Okay. Any last questions? Bet. If you stand up, Kerry will whiz over with a microphone, suitably washed.
Hi. This is a question which I'm not asking for any detailed answer at the moment. I'm just sort of launching an issue, and that is that we have been following how the hospital has worked, but one of the things that the governors haven't really taken up is all the work we've been doing with our colleagues in the private hospitals. Well, that is the main example. During that period, we haven't asked you, how did that go? How much did it cost us? And was it worth doing? Well, I mean, we had to do it, probably is the answer to that. But I just think it would be, at this point, a good question to ask. And I'm not asking for a lengthy report with loads and loads of statistics, because I know we don't need to give you more work. But it is, I think it's a topic we haven't covered.
Be right back. Spot on. Dom, can I ask you, have a go, and we'll follow it. We will follow it up, Bet, on another occasion as well.
So you're absolutely right, actually, Bet. I'm going to move so I can see you. When you said that our colleagues in the independent sector provided invaluable help, my words, not yours, you're absolutely right. There were some services that we provided through our partners in the teeth of the pandemic that we could otherwise not have provided, particularly services for some of our most vulnerable patients, some of our haematology patients who are suffering from cancer. We moved a whole ward off to the Dunedin Hospital, the Spire Hospital out on the Bath Road. And that enabled us to continue to provide those valuable services throughout the whole of the first wave. Similarly, and Steve's presentation referred to this actually, the Circle Hospital allowed us to get started with our orthopaedic work, our planned orthopaedic surgery, as quickly as any other hospital, if not faster than anyone else in the whole country in May 2020. And in terms of outcomes, because this is a really good example, we audited through our clinical director, Tom Pollard, the first 100 patients who'd gone through orthopaedic surgery at the Circle Hospital as part of that work. Not one of them developed COVID as a result. And so we were really assured that that was not only a high quality, but a very safe service as well for patients at what still was quite a vulnerable time. We've really built on those partnerships and long-standing relationships with our local providers over the recent months. And even now, they're doing substantial pieces of work for us, whether it's in general surgery or in other specialties, to make sure that we can treat as many patients as possible who've often been waiting a long time, sometimes in pain, and make sure they get their care in the most timely fashion. That's generally additive, supplementary to the work that we do on all of our sites inside RBFT. But without their support, and they largely do it at the same tariff price, so they're not making a profit from us, we simply wouldn't be able to treat the high volume of patients who now need care. So I think that's probably a decent summary of where we're at. But if there's anything that I haven't particularly focused on, of course, I'd be happy to follow that up.
That's fine as a general answer, yeah.
Thanks. No problem.
Dom, if you've known Bet as long as I have, that means we haven't answered the question yet. Okay, sorry?
We'll do chapter and verse next.
Very good. Any other questions? Okay, they're coming in. So Andrew, and then Clive, and then Linda.
Hello, my name's Andrew Hayden. I'm the Nursing and Midwifery Staff Governor. It's just a question on governors, actually. We have the potential of up to 29 at the moment, and I'd like to see another one added in there if possible. What's the position of a youth governor? We have patients who with long-term conditions, like my daughter, type 1 diabetic. She's going to be the future. She's only 8. Probably wouldn't sit very well on the board. But we've got some fantastic patients who are 16, 18, who going forward are going to be possibly nurses, doctors within the trust. Is there an opportunity for us to get a youth governor in place in the coming years?
Thank you. So, I think as a general comment, and please forgive me, anyone else in the room that feels offended by this, but I think we would like to see some younger people coming through the governor group generally. Absolutely. As to whether we can create a youth governor, I'm going to pass that question to Caroline Lynch, our company secretary. Trust.
Hello. Andrew, in terms of the composition of governors, that's absolutely within the gift of the council itself. So I would suggest we take it up at the next meeting, we have a look at that. We did have a youth MP governor some time ago. We actually gave that position up because we couldn't find anyone who was interested. And I think it sat vacant for about 6 years in total. But absolutely, the composition of the governors is down to the governors themselves. So we can absolutely pick that up and take that forward.
I think going to the work that Sharon Herring's doing presently with like the youth carers.
Absolutely.
Hopefully getting the youth forum up and running.
Yeah.
Part of the steering group would be fantastic, and there's some really good, competent people that I'd like to see.
Absolutely. Let's pick it up at the next council meeting. Okay?
Thanks, Caroline. And bring your daughter along. All right, Clive, I think you had your hand up just now, and Linda, you did as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Graham. My question is about the Royal Berkshire charity. It's a very successful organisation, but the charity holds pretty significant reserves Is there any particular reason why we're holding pretty large reserves? Are we planning to spend the reserves in the hospital in the next few years, or are we waiting for an opportunity to spend them when the hospital is redeveloped?
So shall I have a first go at that? Nikki, I might ask you to make comments. So you're right, Clive. I get frustrated that we're sitting on too much money. We are heavily constrained as a foundation trust in what we can do with it. We can't put it on the stock market, for example, or high interest earning bonds or anything like that. But we are sitting, after some very, very generous donations over the last few years, we're sitting on a very great deal of money. I think in excess of £7 million, more than 6 anyway. So the challenge is, how do we spend that? We would love to find a very big project to deploy that. So we are looking at that. There are lots and lots of small calls on the amount as well in the trust. And of course, we are still holding some funds which were donated by a very generous donor for the staff wellbeing property as well. So I think all of that says we've got to do better at finding solutions to spending that money, because sitting in a bank, it's earning us nothing. And it does worry me a little that we've been building it, and that's very good, but we're not really doing what the donors have asked us to do, which is to deploy those funds into the service of patients. So it's patients and staff, so we must do that. Nikki, did you want to supplement that?
A really, really good question. We are absolutely holding a portion of money on balance for the completion of the Health and Wellbeing Centre following the generous donation from last year. The other thing, I guess, to note, and I agree with Graham, we have recently refreshed our charity strategy and a relaunch of the charity, so looking at major fundraising campaigns so that we can deploy those funds. Some of the funds are donated with very specific requests from the donors, so they're known as restricted funds. So although on the face of it, it may look like there is a whole amount of free cash available, some of those are for specific designated purposes. For example, there might be an ICU fund or a cardiac fund or something. So some of those funds sit in that restricted category, and therefore we are working with the services to which they relate to make sure we can turn those into usable actions rather than sitting as cash. But absolutely, the major fundraising campaign as part of the new fundraising strategy is something which we will see developments on over the coming months.
Great, thanks, Nikki. Linda.
Thank you. I just wondered whether you could give us an update on the parking and transportation situation in terms of how it relates to the hospital and patients and visitors who come to the hospital.
Right, absolutely. Steve.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, this is a really thorny issue, as you know, because we've had improvement in the experience of getting into the hospital and parking as one of the routes into the hospital for patients and visitors as part of our kind of quality account, I think, for several years in the past, and we haven't kind of nailed it in terms of what we've needed to do. So, prior to going into the pandemic, it was something that we wanted to take a major kind of overhaul around. We have kind of engaged in some external experts around who've worked with about 120 different kind of public sector organisations in terms of solutions around, challenging solutions around parking, but in the broader context of travel and transport. And that's the other thing that we need to we talk about parking, we need to think about travel and transport in the context of our responsibilities in Reading with the local authority around the sustainability agenda, the movement to low carbon, zero carbon, and how we create an environment where there are alternatives to car use. So that is really important. So we there's some proposals that we're kind of working through at the moment about how we use the existing car parking facilities that we have on the Royal Berkshire Hospital site in a way that has a separation between where patients and visitors park versus where staff park. We're looking at, for staff parking, a number of opportunities, both on-site, near site, and further away from site, where we can try and support and incentivise decisions that our staff can make about where they park. We're tomorrow actually opening, in terms of our active travel, the new, and we showed it on the video, the new cycle village, which has got, I think, spaces for up to 80 bikes to be stored indoors, for also e-bikes, changing facilities, and we're also trying to promote through Reading buses the subsidised travel and season ticket travel to actually encourage different ways of actually moving into work. We also recognise, though, for many of our staff, actually childcare responsibilities, other caring responsibilities, not just for children, but other caring responsibilities, shift work, all those other kind of parameters, will mean that, many of our staff will want to and need to use kind of a car to get to work, and we need to try and support them in finding the most appropriate way of getting to work by car if they need to, and to park. So we've launched, I think, just this last week, a microsite that staff are accessing to give them information about some of the kind of opportunities for active travel. We've just launched as well a request for them to give us their kind of intentions about their future kind of travel requirements, including car travel and parking. We've made, I think, a decision that any significant changes at this stage to kind of how particularly staff are able to park on site or around the site of the Royal Berkshire Hospital actually would not be helpful at the moment. We're going into the winter period. Our staff are tired. They are, it's been a challenging period for them, but we have signalled a real intent that we need to make a step change in terms of the way that we balance travel, transport and access to parking for patients, for visitors and for staff. And so our kind of commitment, once we had kind of effectively surveyed staff who may have an intention to have a car parking permit and to travel to work by car, is to then firm proposals up in the early part of the new calendar year and to put in some of those new proposals for staff in terms of their access to parking from spring next year, when hopefully we've got more data about parking requirements and travel and transport requirements, and we're in a slightly different kind of environment in terms of not going into the winter coming out of it. The issue for us raises is that we know that there are some experience challenges for patients, visitors and for staff because of coming on to the Royal Berkshire Hospital site. We're going to have to manage those actively in the short term, and we've put some investments into kind of our physical environment around parking spaces, also about safety, where we will continue to try and make sure people are parking safely on the hospital site, because that is a real worry for us around some of the health and safety issues. And we're looking in the short term to try and kind of purchase some additional parking around the hospital site for staff, which will give us a little bit more flexibility in the short term. And I say, really promoting active travel as well, to give staff particularly the choice of how they can actually come to work as well, rather than necessarily just relying on a vehicle. So lots going on now. We know we need to crack it, once and for all, and we will have some proposals certainly that we will put into our staff community early in the new year, which we hope will give a better deal for patients and for visitors and for staff in terms of their experience of getting on into the hospital site. And we're really happy, we absolutely share that with kind of governors as that unfolds over, the coming months. Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, it is hot off the block, so we will make sure it's covered, I'm sure. I'm sure you won't let us forget, Linda. Okay, look, I'm going to bring it to a close there. We're running a little behind, and I'm very conscious that the video link closes in a minute as well. So it was, as I say, first time face-to-face, so thank you for all of you that have come. physically. Thank you for those that have been online. I know we've had many dozens online, even though we had a few questions. But thank you for that. Thank you to the speakers. Very, very good and very short, so appreciate that. It was very efficient. It left more time for questions, so appreciate that. From my point of view, I just want to thank the whole board. It's been a tough year, and the board has had to manage many things, both the pandemic and at the same time have a view on the horizon as to where we're going in the future. So that takes a skill. And if it gives the governors some confidence, the collective board time of this board in this trust is 53 years. So that's quite a lot of experience that I think the collective board brings, and I thank them immensely for their contribution, for leading this organisation, providing the appropriate governance to make sure it's a safe and proper organisation. A couple of final things. Thank you to Carolyn's team. We've got Hannah, we've got Amber, we've had Maureen, we've had Erica outside, we've had Andy, I think, at the back. I'm sure I've missed someone, and Kerry, who's been diligently cleaning the microphone, so amongst a million other things. So thank you for them. This, as you know, this sort of thing doesn't happen at the snap of a finger. It takes a lot of effort, so thank you all for that. And last but not least, thank you to all of you again. The AGM next year is on the 21st of September. I hope we are back in a mass arena at that time and we can see a lot more faces. Until then, safe journey back, or have a good evening if you're at home. Thank you very much.